Does this reaction make sense based on what's happening? My child falls and breaks his arm. I should be stressed and worried about that. But am I feeling that like, oh my God, it's my fault, I'm a bad parent and spiraling? That's my stuff.
Welcome to Worthy Mother Podcast. I'm your host, Emily Hardy, a mom of two on a mission to help moms everywhere feel less alone. This is not a parenting podcast. Instead, it's a space for pushing back against societal expectations of perfection and embracing self-compassion in your motherhood journey. Let's get into it. Hey, welcome back to Worthy Mother Podcast. Today we are going to be talking about something that I think most of you could probably relate to in some way. That is just basically how our kids can trigger us in a variety of ways based on different things we maybe have been through in our past, who our actual individual children are, all of that. Most of us have found ourselves in situations where we are triggered by our kids, and that may be kind of surprising. It may not be something that we planned for when we were like, I'm going to have kids. It's going to be great. I'm going to love this. And all of a sudden there's these things coming up that we didn't necessarily expect. So joining me for this conversation is Lilly Risch. She is a licensed clinical social worker who specializes in EMDR therapy, and she is fantastic when it comes to working with trauma, understanding basically what we're going to be talking about today. So Lilly, welcome to Worthy Mother Podcast. I am so happy to have you here. So happy to dig into this conversation with you. Can you just tell us a little bit about you, maybe your family, and even the work that you do?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Emily. I'm so pumped to talk today. So I'm Lilly. I'm a therapist. I am a group practice owner. I'm a wife. I'm a mom. My son is 6.5 years old, and he wishes his birthday was like September 1st, not September 22nd, so that he was earlier, but one child. And so we'll also share that he is adopted, and that's just an extra layer of my journey, which I'll talk about my journey a little bit today. And then, of course, kind of dive into some of the general pieces of everyone else's journey. I own Forward Healing Therapy here in Metro Milwaukee, and I have contract therapists that work with me. We do EMDR, art therapy, brain spotting, child therapy, dyadic therapy, therapy with adults. My own caseload is a lot of work with attachment trauma and helping people heal from complex trauma, PTSD, and then deep attachment wounds as well. I have experience working in the child welfare system with adoption, as well as medical social work as well, and then working with traumas such as sexual assault in my old career in Colorado. So I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, you have just like a wealth of a background that you bring to this conversation. So I'm so grateful for that.
Thanks.
And I also just want to point out in the conversation, being an adopted mother or not adoptive mother, that so often in these conversations that we have, we're talking about becoming a mom and all that comes with it. And there can be this natural default to talking about like when you are somebody who's birthing a child, and because there are specific changes, transformations that come with that. But so much of it is actually like just the act of being a mother and having a child that you're in charge of taking care of. And I think in this conversation in particular, I just want to point out that the lens of the nuance in the conversation of that this is all mothers that go through different interactions, different dynamics with your child and your children and your family and your spouse or your partner or somebody you're co-parenting with, your extended family. And I want to just bring a little bit of attention to that, how when we're having these conversations, there's so many factors in what can come up. And I think that's important to acknowledge that, we all have different experiences, and yet there's still such universal threads through our experiences.
Absolutely. I like to talk about it as just different layers and complexities.
Totally.
So yeah, absolutely. That's perfectly said. Completely agree.
Yeah. Okay. I'm glad it came out kind of clear, because I was telling, before we hit record, I was telling Lilly I'm recording in a different location today, and I'm like, I might be a little off my game, but we're getting into it. We're feeling it.
We're here. It's hot and humid.
Can't always,
I don't know about you.
Yeah, it's a lot harder here than where I live. So
yeah.
Okay, I want to just ask you kind of right off the bat,
Yeah.
Why does having kids seem to bring up all our stuff? Like, we're thinking about just You have a baby, you have a child, you bring this new life into your home, and a lot of times, like maybe right away, maybe over time, just like your stuff comes forward.
Absolutely. The simple answer is because parent-child is a relationship. Having a child is being in relationship with another human. And so we learn to be in relationship from our first relationships. That's the simple answer of why it brings up our stuff, is because attachment transfers. So it's, I think, pretty common knowledge that our kind of attachment struggles or complexity or wounds will transfer to our partners because they're our biggest attachments. So, you know, the narrative of like, I married my father, for example, right? That is because we are, you know, we learn about love and care from our first relationships. And so those dynamics that feel familiar, we are often attracted to, right? So I'm getting like Freud here.
Yeah.
So it's different with children, right? There's a different dynamic and relationship than our partners, and it is still a relationship of care and love. And so it brings up how we are in relationship with caring for something, someone, something. And that is greatly learned from how we were loved and cared for. And that is just the nature of us being humans.
Yeah, I think just simply stating like how we are in relation with our children. We don't necessarily always talk about it in that way, but that is really like, you think about the dynamic in the home, you think about just the differences in personality, and then all this responsibility that comes along with it. And I think that piece there about our own attachment, our own way of being in relationships stems from our childhood and likely the relationships that you had with the people who were caring for you. And so it makes sense then, right? That like that's gonna, it's kind of coming full circle in a very big way.
Yes, exactly. It's so incredibly complex, just like you opened this conversation talking about, right? Because the way, like, it's not just relationship with somebody in terms of like biggest attachment. It's also bringing forward our experiences of vulnerability in relationship.
Yeah.
And so very often I see struggles for people who've experienced complex trauma or attachment struggles come up at different developmental times for children.
Yeah.
And so I will also just like preface the conversation by saying I have a pretty expansive definition of trauma. That the mental health field, I think some of us say trauma is a car accident or sexual assault or domestic violence, for example, right? I completely agree. And I can say it's trauma or not, but what I'm talking about in general are like the experiences that shape who we are. And some of those experiences are not ideal. So a lot of what I do in my work is working with people who might have had a lack of care, a lack of eye contact as kids, a lack of attunement, emotional or even physical, being touched as a baby over and over and over and over again. That has an impact on our attachments and relationships and how we understand ourselves in the world. So it is sort of this, like, I talk about the work that I do sometimes as like swimming underwater in the dark, because sometimes there are not words for what we're talking about. It's a lot of sensations. It's a lot of like, this was the overall soup of upbringing. And it's sort of like, I don't know any different, because that is it, just that what was familiar, right? So talking about a lot about like the things that we need in attachment, the things that we need in terms of nurture and care, and not getting that can absolutely then come up as a parent, because that can feel really scary for a parent to have that level of closeness. Not saying, I have absolutely seen it happen, and I think it also can be incredibly healing to be a parent in so many ways. I mean, it's a whole other conversation, right? I told you I would go down rabbit holes. I'm in a rabbit.
I love it.
I was like, I'm the queen of rabbit holes. So
keep going.
I love it. So I think it depends on what it depends on so much. It depends on how old is the child, right? Like how old is your child? What's coming up developmentally? There are often times that we are so comfortable with certain developmental ages, and then others we're like, oh my gosh, this is bringing up all my stuff. If that,
Yeah.
right?
It totally makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think like what really is becoming clear as you're saying all of that is it's, you know, if we think about trauma, we think about those, like, I know it can be said as like big T traumas, these like
Yes.
events or like moments that are traumatic. While those may be, you know, hard to deal with, it's also maybe easier to identify. Not even maybe easier to identify. It usually is a lot easier. And so putting the work in to address it and all of that,
yes,
may be more clear. Again, even if it's
absolutely
really difficult to do. When we are talking about things that are not obvious, they maybe have never really impacted us in a big way because they've never had the opportunity to. We've not been raising a child before, and then all of a sudden you are, and they hit a certain age and there's these things coming up. It's things that you maybe couldn't have worked through in the past because you didn't even, like, the awareness wasn't there. You didn't know it existed.
Exactly.
It's just a really complex thing.
Yeah.
It can be, I think, hard to even acknowledge some of that as trauma in a lot of ways because, again, it doesn't look the way that maybe we've learned that trauma does.
Yes.
Yeah, just the complexity of it is very in your face when you think about it in that way.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
So I'm wondering what kinds of things you see come up for moms that they've never faced before. I know I'll just kind of preface by saying for me, I think a lot about like the idea of mom rage coming up for me. That was something like I felt anger that I had never felt before pretty early on in having my child. And like that has continued. My son is almost 7, so about the same age. My oldest son is almost 7, so about the same age. And it's like just the roller coaster ride of like different things and our dynamics. You know, for me, rage has come up a lot, but I know for other parents, like other moms, that may be something that comes up, but there's a lot of other things that can come up. So what are some of those various
themes?
Things. Themes.
Yeah. So, I mean, the themes that I see a lot are guilt. I mean, guilt is so big, I think. It just in the work that I do, and I think, I don't know what you think about this, but I do think there is a sort of level of guilt that is pretty persistent in our world. Like I think some of that is we have way too much information about parenting. So like, of course we should be perfect at it because we have all the information. Well, that's a bunch of BS, right? So I think that I'm constantly working on like, and I'm a therapist, right? So I should be perfect, right? My kid should never need therapy. He should be like absolutely perfect. Bunch of BS, right? So I think there is like a pretty consistent theme that I see as well as for myself of, am I doing enough? Is he in the right school? Am I attuning to him enough? Am I playing games with him enough? Is he watching too many screens? Like, I mean, there is just so much information and knowledge that is sometimes unhealthy as a parent, and then this feeling of like, am I doing enough gets in. So I think guilt is really big. I think especially for folks who if you have that as a theme in your life, it's going to come up in your parenting.
Yeah.
So that's just the overall, that's just what it is overall for like anxiety or core beliefs that we have about ourselves. They are going to come up in most areas of our life. They're going to come up at work. I feel like I'm not doing enough for my boss. They're going to come up in a marriage. I'm not doing enough for my partner. They're going to come up in our parenting as well. I am not a good enough mom, right? And so that theme can come up a lot. I also see themes of like, I can't keep them safe, which is really, it's heartbreaking, you know, and that can come from a place of like feeling unsafe as a child, like ongoing, maybe instability, lack of care and comfort, lack of somebody like being in charge, right? Like As parents, we need our kids to feel like they've got me.
Yeah.
Like they've got me. And that's not explicit. Most of this is implicit and unconscious, like subconscious feelings and beliefs that we have parent to child. We need our kids to feel like they've got me, right? Parents don't have to be steady all the time, but like in the moments of fear, like my parent has got me. And so many times people that I work, like, that isn't the case. So children can definitely then come up with this feeling of like, I have to have myself, right? And so then sometimes there's that feeling of like pervasive fear for our kids, like pervasive fear of like letting them go and do the things that they need to do to develop. And that can be, it's harder as kids get older, because as kids get older, we have less control.
Yeah.
So sometimes for folks who struggle with feeling a lot of like deep down fear, can come out as like a lot of helicoptering or control, right? Well, the old, like I said, the older kids get, the more, like now we're to the point where we let our son with the neighborhood kids bike around the neighborhood. We have a safe neighborhood, right? We're very, very fortunate for that. But that could be very, very, very scary for somebody who didn't experience a level of safety growing up. And then that can then impact parenting, which can then, of course, your child isn't always getting like what they need to take risks. And that's one of the scariest things as a parent. I think there's like a baseline that's very normal to feel like, I'm going to quote Barack Obama because he had this great,
Do it.
he was like having a child is like your heart like is wandering around. Did you read that? Like in the street.
Yep.
I was like, that is such a good way to put it. So there's a, like everything I'm talking about today, like there's such a level of normal to all of this.
Yeah.
Then when you add in like the deeper kind of layers of complex upbringing or attachment wounding, it can get, it's so much more heightened. Back to themes, a couple more themes I think are like, sometimes we see ourselves in our children, especially with biological children, right? And so if there's an age that our child is hitting where something traumatic happened, so I see it sometimes with like sexual abuse, right? It can definitely bring up those like old feelings for us, for people, of like reminders of that. And then maybe an increased and heightened fear of like, I have to make sure they're safe. I have to keep them safe, right? Is this bad thing going to happen to them? And so I see a lot of like projection of things that happened to a parent that like, I have to make sure this doesn't happen to my child. In the same way, things like, I have to make sure that my child feels seen and heard because I never felt that. And what I say to parents is like, you're talking about it right now. That is not going to be like, what is different for your child? You know?
Yeah.
But it is really common for those fears to come up because they're our world. Like we would do anything for our kids, you know?
Totally. I want to dig into that idea that some of it's normal and some of it's maybe something that like is actually getting in the way of us parenting and being happy. Before we do that, though, I do want to ask specifically about mother wounds, because I think that is a particular experience and type of trauma that, like, before we get into the conversation of how normal certain things feel, I think that is something that there are so many mothers out there who are dealing with. Maybe not having had a mother that they aspire to be like, and the complexities that come with that. So can you just like tell us a little bit about mother wounds and what maybe that means and how that can manifest?
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, clearly there is a very deep and foundational connection between mother and child, right? And I even do some prenatal work. So I think we can say that goes back pretty deeply and pretty subconsciously. So like with that understanding, mother wounds can come up with different types of injuries, like emotional injuries to that maternal attachment. So we can say inadequate attachment, emotional neglect, like disapproval, over control. I think, like you said, there are some very clear ones, like unmet physical needs, right? Or abusive situations. The ones that are more challenging to name and validate are the subtle, maybe nonverbal, and subconscious impact that that a mother might have to like a child. And some examples of that I see a lot in my work are a sense of I wasn't wanted. Like I wasn't wanted, and there is validity to that. Like maybe the mother didn't want to carry or didn't want to have the child and wanted to give them up, right? And that maybe is something that is confirmed. It doesn't matter, right? Like there is still that sense of I wasn't wanted. I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't exist. And those are some very existential, like very deep mother wounds. There's a whole spectrum, right, that we can get into all the way up to verbal and emotional abuse. Kind of like what I mentioned, or a lack of the nonverbals that are needed with attachment. So attunement, connection, eye contact is huge. There is reparative work that I do in attachment-focused EMDR where I work with a client. It's a very specific niche where I work with eye contact. So my eye contact to my client's eye contact, and then we do slow tapping in order to help with some of that reparative work. It's called eye gaze, and that is because that wasn't there for them. And it is actually like a very deep mother wound to not have, because that is how babies, and that's how we understand, like, I'm here, I'm self, like I exist, is that mirroring. So there is a whole line of spectrum with mother wounds, but those are some of the themes that I see come up in my work.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing all of that. And again, like everything in this conversation, it's like seeing the complexity, seeing the layers. So what I'm kind of thinking is that with all of these things we've talked about, all of these themes that can come up, there can be some validity in the concern, as you said. And there's some of these fears, like the quote, thinking about your child walking around outside of you, your heart walking around outside of you. It's like there's an underlying fear that just is going to exist because you can't control the world. You can't control everything. And that's valid. And then with some of this, it's like we also do acknowledge that we cannot be the perfect parents to our children, right? So there is going to be like even some level of harm done in that attachment just because we're not going to be perfect. So again, there's valid concerns, I guess, in some of that of like, yes, of course I'm not going to be perfect.
Yeah.
But that can very easily slide into this not so helpful, like,
yeah,
I'm a bad parent, I'm a bad mom, I can't do this. Yep. So I'm just wondering your thoughts around that. I don't even know specifically what the question is, but like maybe like where is the distinction? How can we understand that distinction? How does building self-awareness of our own triggers like not slide into an over analysis of like I'm screwing this up too?
I completely I also ask questions without asking questions. So
yeah.
So I
just go for it.
Like I'm on the same page as you. So I think that it is something to really be honest with yourself about. No, I think that one of the best things we can do as parents is our own work. If we want to support and help our kids, we can do the work for ourselves first. And just like side note, that's why one of the therapists that works with me, I feel so passionately about her work because she does dyadic work with kids and parents. So really looking at like that attachment, because I think sometimes us as a mental health care system, we say, oh, that 7-year-old is acting out, they need therapy. And this is not a blame game for parents, but there are also so many pieces of what is happening in the relationship that isn't being focused on or acknowledged, that isn't like the long-term solution, or like what's going to help that child in the long term is really that parent getting into therapy also. So one of the biggest things is being honest about what is your stuff without shame and guilt. Like, that's, I think, what prevents people from being honest about what's their stuff is we feel bad about it, right? Guess what? We all have our stuff. Like, it's just we do. And you're not a bad person because you have stuff and it's affecting your kid. Like, that just happens. So being really honest about what is my stuff and what are the layers that I can work on that are going to help my child in relationship with me is huge. And sometimes, unfortunately, for many reasons, not because they're bad parents, but sometimes parents just don't get there right away. And there's always value in doing it later with kids. Like, there's always value, I think, throughout your child's life. So I think it's like you said, where is that line, or where, you know, of what is kind of normal in our culture and society and what is our stuff is so hard to say. But I like to think about it as a jar of muck, like a mason jar that's filled with, you know, like muck that you have at the bottom of a pond. And if our kid is triggering us, like, it gets shaken up, right? And then we're super activated. It affects our parenting. Maybe we're not showing up in the best way that we want to. So what we can do in therapy is pour out the muck, right? And then we, of course, have like societal muck, right? And things that are kind of like normal, because we are meant to react to things that are stressful. And that's kind of how I think of it. Like, does this reaction make sense based on what's happening? My child falls and breaks his arm. I should be stressed and worried about that. But am I feeling not like, oh my God, it's my fault, I'm a bad parent, and spiraling? That's my stuff. Does that make sense? You know?
It totally makes sense. Yeah. Well, and I think there was something you said right at the beginning of that about it's not a blame game, like blame the parents, you know, and I think that is such a piece of, like, a really important piece of the puzzle of, like, we have to understand that acknowledging our responsibility and role in something is not a bad thing. It's not like we're admitting we're awful and then have to look at that and all of these things. It's like, no, we are all imperfect. We are all going through life. And I think, like, as you're saying that, and you said, like, as your child gets older, dealing with some of the stuff that maybe hasn't been dealt with, like, that's okay too. And I think about how many adults there are out there who just wish their parents would do the work now,
right?
Right? Like, these people walking around in their 30s and 40s who wish their parents would put in that work. How restorative that can be at any point. Mm-hmm. When you think of it in that way, it does release some of the guilt of, like, oh, I didn't deal with all my stuff before having kids and now I'm having to look at it. It's like, well, yeah, because this is the time that it's come forward where you can look at it, and there doesn't have to be so much shame in that. I also acknowledge that, like, for our generation, there is so much pressure on kind of breaking cycles. And I believe that it's a really beautiful thing that we're having these conversations and saying, you know what, we don't have to keep passing along cycles of harm to our kids. We don't have to keep passing on generational trauma in these ways that may have been passed on for generations and generations and generations.
Yeah.
But I think going back to the idea of there is also so much information, there is so much conversation around these things, and it can feel like immense pressure.
Mm-hmm.
I think, too, based on the fact that so many of us have grown up feeling like we need to be perfect, we need to be doing well at everything, especially women. Like,
yes. So true.
Sorry about the dogs.
Oh, no worries about it. They agree.
Yeah, they agree. It can be such a challenging thing to come up against. Like, again, it's the complexity. It's the complexity of, okay, I'm going to deal with this stuff, and I know that I'm going to make a change for my child, but now it feels like I need to do that perfectly. I need to be the one to break all of these cycles. I need to be the one to heal all my stuff, almost with the goal of then my child doesn't have to go to therapy because I did this right. And it's like, that's also not, like, that's also our trauma coming forward and saying, like, we're trying to be perfect.
Yes. And we don't want perfect kids. Like, I mean, we don't, you know, part of child development is a parent leaving a child in a high chair and the child being sad and then the parent coming back. You know, like having a parent that's like always there and always doing everything for that child, like that's not helpful. That's not good. Just that, right? Like kids need to grow up in all of the safe messiness, if that makes sense, you know, of the human condition. So, in terms of breaking the cycle, I mean, I haven't even thought about it like this before, but I appreciate it, like this conversation of like, can we really completely break it? You know, because I think that even though I've done a lot of work and I'm a trauma therapist, I still think there's stuff that I'm passing down to my child. And I'm at the point where, like, it's okay. He's okay. He's going to be fine, you know? Like, he is fine. And so there are definitely things that we could break the cycle with, like incredible things I see in my work, which is like there's a history of sexual abuse that goes back 5 generations, and there isn't in this generation. Like, that gives me goosebumps, you know? But when we're talking about like breaking the cycle of underlying anxiety, right? I mean, there's genetics in that too, right? Or breaking the cycle of being a caregiver. Like, if that's being a caregiver and people pleasing is like, that is just, those are just things that make us human. So, yeah, I think that when we're looking at the spectrum or the threshold, if you will, of raising healthy, emotionally connected kids, we do put a lot of pressure, I think, on ourselves to make them like perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it just points to the fact that, yes, we're talking about a relationship, we're talking about a dynamic within the home, but we do exist in the world that we exist in. And
Exactly.
part of that is that our children, like, we are preparing them for the world. Like, we are preparing them for adulthood. And I mean, you think about, like, we've talked about attachment wounds and things like that. There's also so many people who look back and they're like, well, my mom did it all. My mom was perfect. And of course, that's not true.
No.
But if that's the appearance that you
Yes.
have of your mom,
Yes.
what does that, do to you to feel like, well, I'm failing because I'm not living up to that? If we're not showing up perfectly for our kids, if they're not seeing us being perfect,
Yeah.
maybe that's a good thing, right? Like, maybe that's something that then they won't be taking on into life of like, well, I should be able to handle everything because my mom did.
Right. And what is that narrative, though? Like, of the quote unquote perfect mom? I remember, and I'm just flashing to this, that my mom had a mug that had like said like super mom on it. And it was like, oh, that's weird. Balloons. And it had like a picture of a woman that was like holding everything up. I just remembered that and made that connection of that is so many times the narrative of like, my mom was perfect. She did it all. And so then it can be really hard for people to talk about their parents and what their parents didn't do perfectly.
Yeah.
We have a lot of protection for our parents. And so obviously, as we're working on our own stuff as parents, our parents come up. And so sometimes we need to talk about, what I will say with clients in session is, I'm not here to blame your parents. Like, I think your parents did a great job because you're here, right here talking to me. Like, your parents did more good things than not. For you to be here sitting in my office right now, I can say that pretty confidently is true, right? So just to put that out there and say, like, we don't need to blame anyone. It just is. All of these things just are.
Yeah.
We don't need to blame anyone.
I think that's so powerful and such a hard thing to wrap your mind around,
isn't
in a way,
it?
because and I think that's why we feel such guilt with our own things, is we feel like we're to blame. And maybe looking at that relationship, looking at ourselves as the child and knowing we don't have to blame. There's a lot of factors for why somebody did or didn't show up in a certain way. And, they have their own things. They have their own trauma. They have their own world that they were existing in and grew up in, and their own imperfections based on that. And yes, there's accountability. There's accountability we all have to take, right? Like, we do have agency in how we heal, really.
Yeah.
But knowing that may not be available to everybody, and for ourselves, that like, it's not just an indefinite, like, we can't just heal everything. That's not how it works, right? We can do the work, we can continue doing the work, but like we're always going to be imperfect. Like that's just the human condition.
Exactly.
I'm wondering,
Yeah.
so thinking specifically about like with our kids when they are when they're doing something that our automatic response is to feel triggered and bring up whatever it brings up, right? Anger, like shutting down, trying to shut their responses down. Like there's a lot that can come up when we feel triggered by our kids.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how we can work to respond, quote, better to that, to really like
Absolutely.
work against the kind of more natural responses that come up because of our own stuff.
And I'm just thinking of an example with my child because it happened yesterday. He's out of town. He's out of town with my wife, and he's doing like a little flag football camp. And I was like, oh, I wish I could see it and be there. And so I was talking to him on FaceTime, and he's watching a show. Not ideal. And I'm like, so asking him all these questions, like, did you do drills? Did you do the ladder? Did you get to tackle? And he's like, Mommy, can you please stop asking me so many questions? Right?
Yeah.
And I was like, yup. Mm-hmm. But like, there's a piece of me that's like, ouch. Like, you don't want to talk to me? Like, that hurts my feelings. Right? So it's not taking it personally.
Yeah.
Like that is one of the biggest pieces I think with parenting is that is not about me. Like he wants to watch Wildcrats. He doesn't want to talk to me about drills. Like there's a window of time that he wants to talk to me about stuff and it's very slim. But like there is that feeling of like, ouch, like you don't want to talk to me? Like you said that I'm asking you too many questions. Like it feels critical, right? Mm-hmm. From a 6-year-old. So the biggest thing is pausing and understanding like what is going on for my child right now.
Yeah.
Like in their bodies, are they tired? Are they hungry? Are they sleepy? Are they tired of talking because they talked all day? And like it is not about me. It is not about the parent. It is about what is happening in their little bodies. And they take it out on us. And that was just a little example. So, it's simple, but it's so hard to do in the moment is pausing. Mm-hmm. Or if you find yourself in the spiral of it, stepping away and coming back. And I think our generation of parents, I don't know what you think, but I think we do a pretty good job at repair.
Yeah.
And that's huge.
I'd say so.
Look, I overreacted. I'm sorry. Like, and you still need to do this, right? Mm-hmm. And then a ton of self-compassion. Like I will also, in some of my work, suggest and offer the like checking in with your inner child. Like you're in a parenting moment, you're really triggered, and you step outside and you say like, what would I say to that 8-year-old girl? I would say like, she's enough, or it's not her fault. Because that's, if we're looking at this from like a parts lens or a trauma-informed lens, like that is what's coming up for us.
Yeah.
And sometimes people really take to like that work, the IFS kind of internal family systems work, mm-hmm. and it can be super powerful as well. So things like that or journaling is awesome, just like taking a moment. But then I think we also have to at some point just let it go. Like just kind of let it go and move forward and try it differently next time.
It's almost like there's a piece of it that's like, stop putting so much meaning behind every time you don't react the way you wanted to. And I think that repair piece is huge, a huge like add to say like, it doesn't, if you get it wrong in the moment, that doesn't mean like the damage is just done and you can't repair. So there's the opportunity for repair, but there's also the fact that like, yes, we're in relation with another human. Like we're not going to react perfectly and that's fine. Like they will be fine as long as they know, going back to what you said, like they know that we're there for them in safety. I know that's been a huge thing for me. My kid's dad and I went through a separation about a year ago and we've, it's been like the kind of, I have my kids 50% of the time now, and there's kind of this distancing of like, not distancing, but I'm with them physically less.
I mean, that's different.
Yeah, it's totally different. And there's also times where like, you know, there's just a lot going on and I'm not maybe showing up for them in the way like the full presence that I would love to be. But
yeah,
that was something I was reflecting on a little bit ago of like these moments where I see that my kids know that I'm there for them, and there doesn't seem to be any like, oh, my mom's here for me less than she was a year ago. Like it really is clear that they know I'm there for them. They know I'm like their person. I'm their solid person. And reflecting on that, it does help with the self-compassion of like, okay, yeah, I might not be getting this right 100% of the time. Like I never was close to that.
Yeah.
I'm also a lot happier now, and there's a lot of better things now. And when I'm, you know, spending time with people, socializing while I have my kids there, because that's the easiest way for me to be around my kids these 2 days that I have them,
completely,
you know, in a row.
Yes.
That's not a negative thing for them. And there's a lot of opportunity for me to take the guilt and for me to feel bad about not being the one that's 100% present with them right now.
Yeah.
But if I look at the actual relationship and I look at how I know that I am the person that they come to, I know that like we are solid in that. There's so much love and they know I'm a safe space for them. Like that's actually all I want. Like I don't need to be with them 100% of the time for that.
It's not healthy.
No.
For them.
Yeah.
But depending on what age they are. But I mean, even for, you know, infants, it's okay for us to leave the room.
Yeah.
And for them to sleep or cry or this and that. Like that's how they learn I have a need and somebody responds.
Yeah.
But then when they're older, it's like I have a need and I figure it out and I ask for help if I need to, depending on what the need is. So yeah, absolutely. It's not always about like the physical like presence.
Yeah.
And it gets less the older they get, which is tough, you know?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a ever-changing dynamic. And I think
yes,
kind of knowing that you're never going to get ahead of it, and that's okay. Yeah. You're going to constantly be figuring it out. You don't know what's going to come up for you next. Like, you have to have self-compassion.
So well said. I mean, if you think about how we change in relationships with our partners, like how much people change over the span of like 10 years, right? Like think about that with kids. They're changing all the time. So I love how you said that. It's an ever-changing dynamic because of how quickly they're developing and changing and learning. We are too, but less. We're more, you know, kind of more established as adults and humans.
It's not happening so rapidly.
No, it's not happening so rapidly. So yeah, a lot of complexities and struggles coming up with that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think this is all such a good reminder too, that it's like we're all continuing to grow, we're all continuing to learn, we all have opportunities to continue to heal. And it also doesn't have to be like we're tackling everything at once, because that's just, it's not productive. It's not really actually what we want for the end goal of having a good relationship with our children and for them to feel safe and loved.
Completely.
Is there anything else you would want to like just leave moms with in this conversation of like you're struggling with triggers or you're just doing your motherhood thing? Like what's important to kind of take away from this?
Yeah, I mean, I think just kind of like adding on to the question about what is it that we can do in the moment if we're finding ourselves being activated or triggered. I like to think about Dan Siegel's wrote some really good parenting books I really like, Hand Model of the Brain. And for listeners, I'm making a fist and thinking about like the 4 fingers on top are the thinking part of the brain, or he kind of says the upstairs brain. That's the cortex and neocortex, and then inside is the limbic system, so emotional and regulation in there, and then brainstem. So we think about that also as like reptilian brain and mammalian brain are inside. When we're activated or triggered, he talks about it as if our lid is flipped. So those 4 fingers kind of go out, like they're not online anymore. We're not problem solving. We're not thinking very well. Our emotional brain is like in the driver's seat. And so we have to regulate ourselves. It's not our child's job to regulate us. It's our job to regulate ourselves. And we are not likely going to be helpful to our child if we're dysregulated ourselves. We need to get to a place of regulation, and then we can co-regulate our child. Depending on their age, of course, they can regulate themselves, but they learn how to regulate themselves from us. Another really nice, I really like Eli Harwood's work as well. She's the attachment nerd on Instagram and just wrote The Securely Attached Child. I love that book, and her work is excellent in talking about this kind of dance and co-regulation with parents and kids. And so like everything that we're talking about today is what comes up for us as a living and breathing nervous system when we're in a relationship with our child, and why then we react in the ways that we do, which is why I'm saying, right, doing our work is so essential to this. But I think a lot about like, where is my nervous system right now? Is my upstairs brain online, so to speak? And if not, like, what do I need to do to get it there? Because it's not helpful. It's actually just like wasting my energy to continue to try to continue with this dynamic with my child if I'm dysregulated myself. So just that quick little, thing to think about really helps me when I have some of those tough moments.
And it gives you something to work on, something to like a skill to learn, right? It's because it really is developing the skill of regulation. And
completely.
That's big, or that's a easier thing to focus on than like trying to fix it all. It's like, no, if we can just get to a place where I know the things that I can do to regulate myself.
Completely.
So much more helpful.
Yes, exactly. Yep. And really powerful for our kids.
Yeah, completely. And they get to learn that by us modeling it too, which is huge.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as we wrap this conversation, I love to ask a question at the end about caring for ourselves as moms, because there's just a lot of conversation and dialogue out there about self-care. And I do believe that it is really important that we are continuously taking care of ourselves, making sure our needs are met. How do you take care of yourself, and how would you, like, what advice would you give to a mom to make sure that she is getting her needs met regularly?
Oh, it's such a great question. It's a great conversation, I think, as well. And I'll, briefly, I think about the external self-care behaviors that I think we think about a lot when we talk about self-care. Getting a massage, going to the gym, that sort of thing. It's also really important to talk about what we're doing internally. So thought reframing, right? Gratitude, journaling, like coping thoughts, reframing our thoughts from I'm a bad mom to look at all these great things I did today, right? Going to therapy and things like that. So doing my own personal work, especially with the like added layer of adoption, which has like briefly as just brings up the complexities of that and grief for my son with that. I have done a lot of my own therapy because of that, which has really helped me let go of some of that in terms of like understanding his life, his little life and his journey. So obviously I'm a therapist, so I'm a big proponent of therapy, but I think that if talk therapy isn't for you, EMDR or brain spotting or other somatic therapies are great. And I also think things like holistic practices like acupuncture, obviously massage, depending on like what it is that you're looking for, can be great. Yoga, breath work, things like that can be absolutely huge in supporting like regulation and being able to like bounce back when things are tough. So for myself, my wife and I are really each other's biggest supports when it comes to parenting, especially with the complexities that we've experienced, not just adopting our son, but being foster parents before that, because it's so complex and just different in terms of like bonding and attachment and our own grief with the kids being, removed from our home when we were doing foster care. So I think I'm just incredibly grateful for her and our dynamic and support to each other, because we definitely tap each other out often.
Yeah.
You're not helping this. You're not helping this. Do you want to take a break? I'm like, oh, fine. So I think that self-care is just so huge, but those are some things, for me that come to mind so that I can show up in the best way that I can in my relationship with my son.
Yeah, I love that. I think that is so important, like the focus on the inner work and meeting those needs from the inside is huge. And then I think also just the idea of like having those people in your life who can tap you out, who can be there, who can be the support that you need when things are really hard, whether that's like really hard in a moment or in a season.
Yes.
Like, that's huge.
Oh my gosh. And community, like what you're talking about is huge, especially for single parents. Like it takes a freaking village. Yeah. Like it takes a village, and we don't often live in villages, but like we need to continue that more because we all need that, and our kids need that too.
Yes, totally. Lilly, where can listeners connect with you and learn more about what you do?
Absolutely. So Instagram is at forward.healing.therapy. And then my website is forwardhealingtherapy.com. I have some blogs up there and then information about my services. I also offer EMDR consultation and business coaching as well for therapists or EMDR practitioners that are looking to deepen their practice.
Love it. You're changing the world in many ways.
Oh, thank you.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing in this conversation with me. So many good little takeaways from this. So really appreciate it.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. It was so lovely to have this conversation with you.
Yes.
So lovely.
I'm so grateful to just get a dig in.
Me too. It's a good, but great way to say it. I'm going to steal all these words. I'm grateful to dig in. Love it.
And thank you so much for tuning in and being here. You are worthy, Mama.